Welcome everybody to Bedbug TV. I'm your host, Jeff White. And in today's episode I wanted to talk to everybody about some research that has recently surfaced online that talked about a study conducted by the Eastern Virginia Medical School where they basically had some people in a small study that they conducted take an antibiotic called ivermectin, which is commonly sold under the trade name of Stromectol here in the United States, and had some people take it, and then had bed bugs feed on them, and they wanted to see what the effect of that antibiotic-treated blood that the humans had would be on those bed bugs. And so basically using antibiotics to potentially kill or affect bed bugs. And we'll get to the bigger picture in a second, but basically what the study found, and it's interesting, is that 3 out of the 5 bed bugs that fed on the people that had taken the antibiotic ivermectin did succumb shortly thereafter. And as I said, that's interesting enough, and it possibly sets up some future research that needs to be conducted. But the study is basically gaining some traction online, starting to show up in a lot of different places. And I, along with many other experts in the field of entomology, have some very serious concerns about this. The bottom line is that this study made it out into the public spotlight way faster than it should have. It's a very small study. It's very early on, and the last thing we want to see people doing is going out and purchasing ivermectin wherever they may be able to get it, because obviously you can get a lot of things online these days, and taking ivermectin to help them control their bedbug infestation at home. Ivermectin has some very serious side effects. It's commonly used to treat river blindness, which is a disease that we don't have here in the United States, which is a very serious disease. When you get that disease, though, there may be very few other options to treat that disease, and so the side effects, or the serious side effects that may be associated with that antibiotic, may be something that people are, willing to tolerate because there may not be many other options. With bed bugs, that's not necessarily the case. We do have good treatment options for bed bugs, and you can get rid of bed bugs without having to do that. And so, this study did not look at the big picture, just looked at the direct effect of ivermectin on bed bugs. Well, what about the side effects? And that's something that needs to be considered in future studies. And, it hasn't even been approved for use against bed bugs. And so there's a lot of concern just on the side effects of ivermectin and what that may do if it were used on a large scale to help with the treatment of bed bugs. But there are also other concerns out there. Using antibiotics to help with disease, or I should say vector-borne illness, such as, let's say, Lyme's disease in deer ticks, is something that's been around for years. That concept has been around a very long time. In ticks, for instance, the actual pool that Lyme's disease comes from is in the rodent population that larval ticks feed on when they first hatch out of an egg. And so Lyme's disease is not what we call transovarial. There's a big entomology term for you, or a big disease term for you. And what that means is that when an adult tick, an adult female tick, lays an egg, and that egg hatches, the disease cannot pass from the adult female through the egg to that first stage tick. And so what that means is that once that tick is born from that egg, it does not have Lyme's disease. It has to acquire it from another place. And so what happens, though, is that tick goes out in search of blood, because that's what they feed on. It latches onto a rodent, which is their common source of food when they first hatch, and that is actually where they tend to get Lyme's disease from. And then, of course, as that tick grows, it has Lyme's disease, feeds on a human somewhere later on in life, or your dog or cat or whatever, and then the dog, cat, or human has Lyme's disease. And so one thing that they've thought to do in the past is to treat rodents with an antibiotic. Put an antibiotic in a bait and put the bait out there in the rodent population, allow the rodents to feed on the bait, which they then get treated with an antibiotic, which would hopefully kill the Lyme's disease in the rodent, and then when the ticks hatch, they feed on the rodents don't have Lyme's disease, and maybe you can reduce the incidence of Lyme's disease that way. And you probably could do that, but there are some major risks with that, because what happens when you do this all the time, and then that rodent over time, or I should say the Lyme's disease over time, starts to build up a resistance to the antibiotic that we're treating it with. Then, when that Lyme's disease makes it back to the human 5, 10 years, however many down the road, and now that it's antibiotic resistance, what are you then treating it with? And so there's a lot of secondary implications to using antibiotics against different insects and vector-borne disease. And, you could create a bigger problem down the road by creating antibiotic-resistant bacteria or antibiotic-resistant bedbugs or whatever the case may be. And so there's a lot of risks associated with this study, and the bottom line is that this is a very, very preliminary study. A ton of work has to go into this before this should have ever hit the public's eye. Because people are going to see this and they're going to go out and start to take dramatic measures, and that's not what we want to see happen. And so in regards to this study, interesting. It's an interesting read, but I strongly, strongly caution people to not react upon this study. Do not go out and start looking for ivermectin to help with your bedbug population. Maybe somewhere down the road it can be used in conjunction with a bedbug treatment to help if research is conducted and they can figure out a way that, whatever the case may be, but that's way down the road. And so please do not see this study and go out looking for ivermectin. It's interesting, but do not react upon it. All right, everybody. If you have any questions about this or anything else, jeff.white@bedbugcentral.com, and I hope to see everybody soon enough.